What's up, basketball coaches, players, and fans? Welcome back to the Pass First podcast, where we share our knowledge of the game. My name is Augie Johnston, and I'm here with my partner, Alex Engel, and we hope you're able to take something away from today's episode that will help you in your basketball journey. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to follow us there. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe there as well so that you don't miss another episode. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking all about turnovers and really the impact that they have on a basketball game. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into today's episode. All right, everybody, welcome in. Like I said, we're talking about turnovers today, something that a lot of coaches can probably relate with as far as being a headache or a weapon that they use to win basketball games. So I think anybody that's listening to this, and Alex, you too, we can all agree that turnovers are bad. So I guess we'll just start the episode off by saying why. Why do you think turnovers are bad?
Well, I think the first thing that's going to come to most people's minds is that you're giving away your possessions and you're giving the other team extra possessions. So that's the first and foremost is just the simple math of it, that if they get more shots up than you do, they're probably going to have a higher chance of winning, right? Unless they shoot an extremely low percentage. So that other things are momentum. They can be momentum changing or momentum breaking. So if you've got, 4 or 5 baskets in a row and you're going in the right direction, and then all of a sudden you start turning the ball over, you can kill your own momentum. And then on the flip side, obviously they can give the other team some momentum as well. And we know that basketball is one of those sports where that can really be impactful. So I would say those are the two things that pop into my head. I'm sure there's more that we'll talk about, but those are probably the first two.
Yeah, and you said the number of possessions, right? And so, in preparing for this episode, I was thinking, how can we talk about turnovers and rebounding? But whenever I think of turnovers, I always think of rebounding too, just because of the number of possession game, right? So let's say your team has, 16 turnovers that game and the other team has 10, like that's six possessions. And, we'll talk more about other reasons why it's bad, but I know that some turnovers are worse than others. So let's go ahead and talk about that right now. So what type of turnovers would you say are worse than others?
And at this point, we're just talking about in general, not necessarily specific times, right?
Right. Just like, I don't know, this kind of turnover would be worse
Right.
than this kind of turnover.
Okay. So I definitely would say like laziness, like lazy passes, those types of turnovers are really bad because you're not really even going to get anything out of it. Like when I think of that, I think of like just robotically swinging the ball around the perimeter and then the defender just jumps out and steals it. Like that's so aggravating because it's like you're not even trying to be aggressive. I have more understanding of someone like, okay, I'm trying to make a play and I got a little too over aggressive, and so we threw the ball away. Obviously still not a good thing, but at least it's like, well, maybe they would have gone through and scored. But when you're just lazily turning around the perimeter, that kills me. And then probably ones where you're like, I would say like panic turnovers. So kind of, I guess, almost similar to that overly aggressive, but instead of trying to make a play, you get in there and all of a sudden someone, you get caught up a little bit, the defender gets up in you and you panic and you just throw the ball away. That's got to be a really frustrating turnover for me as well. I'd say those two stick out.
Yeah, definitely. And you were talking about the ones where you're swinging it around the perimeter and stuff. And those are the worst ones, right? When you, like, let's just say you pass slot to slot and that gets picked off, like that's going to be the worst turnover because that leads to that 1-on-0 break for the other team and they just lay it in. And those are bad. Also, other ones that I think are really bad is when you get picked as a point guard, bringing it up, right? And you get picked right there. Oh, yeah, those are the most embarrassing ones for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get picked and then he goes down and scores a layup, I think those are bad.
Those also can create shakiness in your point guard. Like if you start getting picked, your point guard feels unconfident in themselves, and that can really mess up your whole game.
Yeah, no, I can relate to that as a player myself, like getting picked or even just traveling, like getting picked up full court and then traveling or something like that. And so, yeah, like for me, the worst ones are the ones where you throw them away for an easy 1-on-0 layup for the other team or get picked. And then also, like, I don't mind turnovers, like you said, like if you're being aggressive, you're trying to make a play, like you have good intentions, but like there's a lot of times too where like you're just doing too much. Like
Mhm.
you'll see players, you're like, hey, you're doing too much, man. You're our catch and shoot guy, and you're out here trying to clear everyone out in ISO and go, and then you're just having nothing and then throwing a turnover. Like those are other bad ones.
Mhm.
But would you agree that some turnovers are worse than others?
Yeah. I mean, I know the numbers say no, it's a turnover, is a turnover, but yeah, I do think there are some that are worse than others. I think it comes down to, like you said, um, were you going to get anything out of it? Like that to me would be the slightly defining factor. Is like, okay, was I going up to score, or was I trying to make a play and dish to my big man, and I just kind of didn't throw it perfectly? That to me is better than, like you said, the lazy pass around the perimeter or something like that. Um, Kind of on that note, what do you think about charges? Like, because that's a turnover. Are charges like, oh, I hate charges, or is like, yeah, sometimes it happens, and at least they're trying to go to the basket?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I'm okay with charges because just the fact that I feel like players don't go strong enough to the basket. And it's more to me like when a team takes a charge, it's more like kudos to them than like, hey, we're messing up right now. So I'm okay
Hmm.
with that. How about you?
Kind of, yeah. I'm definitely on your side, a little bit more towards the side that you're talking about, but also at the same time, like I will definitely tell my players like jump stop. Like if you see they're going to take the charge, and I guess it depends. If it's like once a game, I probably can live with that. But I've been in games or coach games where it's like the other team is just boom charge, and it's like, okay, after a while you got to figure it out. You can't keep leaving your feet because they're going to keep taking charges, and it's like 4 or 5 in a game, and that can get frustrating. So obviously the number amount is important there, but like you said, it is definitely something that the other team is doing. And really, most teams are not great at taking charges, and most
Right.
teams don't take a ton of charges. So, and I just kind of want to also throw in there, people listening in are probably thinking like, what do you mean you're okay with turnovers? Like nobody should be okay with turnovers. And it's not that either of us are like, oh yeah, it's totally fine, just throw the ball away. And there are coaches that probably don't care that much, but it's just, you have to come to the grips with reality is that you're never going to play a perfect basketball game, and you are going to throw the ball away sometimes. And so you have to, if you would just blow up and overreact every time you throw the ball away, like you're gonna pull your hair out by the end of every game. So you've got to balance like, okay, where's the real major problem, and where's like, okay, we're trying to do something good, we just made a mistake.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, the reason that this idea came into my head to do an episode on turnovers was I saw somewhere the other day just online, a coach named Zach Boisvert. He had like a chart for turnovers, and he had them all categorized out. Where like there were some are either skill turnovers, and the others are decision making turnovers. And like the skill turnovers, like you can be more okay with, right? Like a player makes a great move, makes a great read, they drive in there, they pass it to a guy, and the pass is like off. Like the pass is just like a little to the left, and he doesn't catch it, and it goes out of bounds. Like, okay, turnover. That's like a skilled turnover though, because he made the right decision, but the guy just didn't catch it and the pass was off. So I think coaches are more okay with that than they are with the decision making turnovers when you're just maybe driving in there, and then making the decision to not make that pass. Is you don't make that pass, and then you get caught in the air, right? You jump into the air, and then you throw a bad pass, and then you throw a turnover. Like I'd be more frustrated with that than I would be with just the skilled turnover, I guess.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
Yeah, and also too, like you mentioned, jump stopping, right? Like that's a huge thing that a lot of coaches want players to do. And if a player drives in there and doesn't jump stop and turns the ball over, then I would say like that's worse than driving in there and jump stopping, making the right, like let's say you drive in there, the big helps on you, you jump stop, super fundamental, you make that bounce pass to the big on your team, but like they do a good job helping and they come and they steal that or something. Like you made the right read, more or less. I mean, maybe it wasn't the right read because they helped, but like that's a pretty tough read to make right there, in that split second.
Hmm.
So for me, I'd be more okay with that one. And so I would say like, yeah, like some turnovers are worse than others. Like if what are they turning? Is it a dead ball turnover? Right? Like if we do something and I throw the ball and it slips through someone's hands and it goes out of bounds, turnover, like it's a dead ball. We can set up our press, if we want. So for
Hmm.
me, like that's different than I don't know other ones.
Well, yeah, because definitely, I mean, like you talked earlier, the straight steal the passing lane or pick someone's pocket, like that's a layup. That's 2 points no matter what. And the dead ball turnover, you might get the ball back. You play defense to get the ball back, and then it really doesn't hurt you if you think about it. Um, yeah, that there's definitely a difference between those.
Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about like time and place. So is it worse to turn the ball over like at the end of the game versus at earlier in the game? I mean, I know like, well, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
So I would say if you're just looking at the overall impact on the game, they are equal, right? Turning the ball over, and this is something that I've said to my kids before, is look, we didn't, if say someone messed up at the end of the game, um, that one play is not why we lost the game, right? We lost the game because we probably had 15 other turnovers earlier in the game. So as far as the impact on the game, it really is the same. A turnover is a turnover. And I guess, you can go into, well, did they score off of them or not? But it's very rare where like the end of the game, you throw one turnover and that's the only 2 points they scored off of a turnover. And so that's why they won the game. Normally that's not how it is. It's happened multiple times throughout the game. So while I will say, but with that being said, at the end of the game, that's when you have to be your sharpest. You have to have the best decision making skills, and you have to take care of the ball the best. And we all know that everything at the end of the game is magnified. So while the impact statistically is probably about the same if you go across the game, everything is blown up more at the end of the game. So yes, it is a little more important because when you're just playing and you're in the middle of the game or the beginning, you don't really know what the outcome is going to be, right? Like you're playing, you're just like, okay, we're just trying to win, get ahead of points. But when you get to the last like minute or two, you know what the outcome is going to be as far as like, if I throw a turnover here, we're not going to win. Like it's that simple. So that's where you really have to take care of the ball. And I think because of that, and there's that added pressure, it does make it a little more important at the end of games to really take care of the ball, because that's how you win close games. If you're the team that always throws the ball away at the end of a game, you're probably going to lose most of those close games. So I think, yeah, there's definitely an impact, even though I know the analytics will say that, they're all the same.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think definitely at the end of the game, it's magnified and it's more important not to turn the ball over. And even if it's not a close game, I mean, definitely if it's a close game, it's like, okay, in your timeout, you're just like, slow it down, let's run our sets, let's execute, don't turn it over. But even if it's not close, like let's say we're up by 10 and it's halfway through the fourth quarter, like if you start turning the ball over, you might lose that game, right? Like at that point, basically all you have to do is not turn the ball over. If there's like 3 minutes, 4 minutes left in the game, you're up by 10 and you'll win. So at that point, yeah, like, time and place is huge. And it's like, it goes hand in hand with shot selection too, right? Like at the end of the game, not only do you not want to turn it over, but your shot selection better be good because, if you're just, and that's how all teams play, right? I mean, at the end of the games, if you're up, you're playing smart. But at the beginning of the game, you have to play free. You can't just be like, I don't know. It's kind of a weird, like a weird thing that yeah, like in the first few minutes, like you can be a little bit more risky, I guess, with your passes, in my opinion, even though that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But I can't think of the word right now. I guess an intangible, like that's another like intangible skill that players need to have where to be able to monitor that, I think, like the level of, carefulness that
Right.
you have.
Well, I think part of it is because at the beginning of the game, it's 0-0, right? And you have to build a lead, right? If you want to win the game. And if you play really conservative all game, while you may not turn the ball over a lot, it's hard to put a lot of points up on the board. And so when you get to the end of the game, that dynamic switches. And now you're looking, like you said, just to eat clock, and you necessarily don't have to score. If you're up 10 with 3 minutes left, you really don't have to score again. All you have to do is eat clock and get stops.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where, everything changes. And I'm going to go a little farther on that and say also, though, you have to be careful as a coach not to be too stagnant, because if you get too stagnant and robotic, then that's when you start turning the ball over even more, because the players start playing like robots. They're like, well, coach had to run the whole play, and they're passing up layups, or they're just throwing those lazy. That's where you see the nonchalant pass, because they're just like, oh, we're just supposed to pass around the perimeter, and the other team starts gambling because they know they're down, and that's where you see those turnovers happen. And I remember last year we had a game where we were up like 20 or 22 or something with only a few minutes left. And we got nonchalant because we're like, oh, the game's over, it's whatever. and the other team scored like 10 or 12 points in the last like 2 minutes, and they didn't beat us, but I think they got it down to like single digits. And the last play of the game, we had the ball and they were like pressing us. I was like, just hold the ball. I remember sitting on the sideline, just hold it, just let the game in. And my player like gave this lazy, like nonchalant bounce pass along the baseline. The other team stole it and like scored again at the last second. And again, we won by like 7 or 9, but I was irate. I was so mad, and I ripped them. And it was weird because I'm like, man, we were up 20 the whole game, but within 2 minutes we gave up like 14 points, and it was just because we were being lazy, throwing the ball away, like not caring. And I was like, if you do that against a close game or a close, team that's good, you're going to lose every time. So it's also trying to build that innate sense within your players, like, hey, you always have to take care of the ball no matter what's going on in the game.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And there is that fine line of like when you're up to like slow it down but still score. Like it's really hard, and it's a fine line too of like, oh, you get a steal, you have a 3-on-2. Do you go for it, or is it more valuable to get up clock? And I don't really know the right answer on that one. I would say you should always try to put points on the board. So I guess I would say that. But I mean, you're risking it at the same time, right? You a 3-on-2 missed layup, boom, outlet. Now they have the advantage. So it's a tricky
Right.
thing. It's a tricky thing for sure. Okay, so we're talking about turning the ball over and how we want to minimize turnovers. What would you say is like a good number to have for your team? What's a goal that you guys shoot for per game?
So one of the kind of standards that I've always heard is roughly around 10. Now that's in high school basketball. So far from what I've seen, that's not easy to do. I mean, even you go to higher levels, like good colleges, I think, are averaging like 7 or 8. That's like the really elite ones. So you get under 10 is probably a really high expectation, but I still think that's where I would like to be. And I had some games last year that we did get under 10. I had some games where we had like 6 or 7 even. But then we also had games where we had like 25, So the disparity is very large. It can be very large. But I always like aiming for, especially turnovers. To me, that's like almost like unachievable like goal. Like every game we're gonna have 10. Probably that's really unachievable for me right now. But I want to aim for that because then that makes them think like, okay, taking care of the ball is important. So that's kind of roughly where I'm at with that one.
Okay, so if you do the math, 10 a game, so that puts players you're looking for players to have, the worst one would be like around 3 or 4 probably, right? Maybe 3 turnovers, and then 1 or 2 here spread out. So yeah, that seems about right. We talked before. My number last year and before has always been 12, which is basically the same thing as 10. But
Right.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, for me, it's like I want my point guard to be, no more than 3 for sure. Maybe 2 would be good. But yeah, okay. So like I said, we talked about, turnovers and reducing turnovers, but there's also the other side of the game, right? The defensive side where you can force turnovers. So do you have a philosophy on forcing turnovers? Are you guys more like, let's protect the house? Or are you more like, hey, we're looking to stat this and force turnovers?
I would say probably more to protect the basket. I do play, in the passing lanes. I have my players playing in the passing lanes. We're not playing like pack line or anything. We're packing it in, but it's not overextended. I don't extend it way out. It's just like the very minimum. Just get a hand in there. Make sure you're shading more towards the basket, not extending super high so that you can't get backdoored. But I do like putting pressure on the ball. Like I want my person guarding the ball to put pressure, force baseline, have everyone, if you're one pass away, you're in deny. And I've found that if we do that, we're either going to cause a turnover or we're going to cause a bad shot. And I think I probably more focus on forcing the other team to take bad shots, because what I've found, at least so far, is when I have teams gamble, if they start to gamble a lot, we end up just getting beat. And it ends up being layups or easy shots instead of turnovers. And yeah, maybe you get a handful more turnovers a game, but for the 5 turnovers that I get, I might get like 15 times that we're beat, and that ratio just is not worth it to me. So I think if you have the right team and the right personnel, or maybe over time, my philosophy could change. But for right now, I prefer to more protect the house. If we get some turnovers, great. We do press, we do run presses and stuff. But even with that, it's not like super gambly presses. It's more like, let's put pressure and make them just throw it away. You know, if they're going to throw the ball away, fine, we'll take it. But I'm not expecting you to gamble to get steals.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that philosophy, especially like at the level that we coach at. You could literally press the whole game, not give up a single layup because you're just conservative with it, with maybe like a 2-2-1 or something like that, and the
Mm-hmm.
other team will turn it over, a couple
Mm-hmm.
times just by dribbling into a trap or just making a bad pass. So that's good. I think, and you made a good point there too. You said, depending on your personnel, and that's what it's been for me. Like, in the past, we were not always big on forcing turnovers. We had some height. We'd protect the house. We wanted to, just like you said, make them shoot contested shots, bad shots, rebound, and play out of the rebound, right? We can transition out of that. At this point, we have a much shorter team now. And so our goal this year is going to definitely be to force turnovers because we just don't want to play in the half court because of the fact that we're short. We're going to get rebounded on in the half court. Teams that are big are going to get to run their sets, get it into their bigs. So our goal is going to be to, press, make or miss. We'll have different presses depending on if we make or miss, and to try to force turnovers. And, that'll be something that after a few games we'll look at and be like, okay, are we actually getting those possessions? Because we can see, right? Oh, look, we had, 12 turnovers. They had 18 turnovers. They out rebounded us by 4. So, okay, we can live with that because we're going to get out rebounded some games for sure because we're so small.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as we're able to force those turnovers, I think we'll be okay. Like we can make up the difference, especially because a lot, forced turnovers do turn into offense, right? People say, hey, have your defense turn into offense. Well, that's kind of what we're going for with all that. So, yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and keep moving on through. So what are some ways, we already kind of talked about it, but what are some ways that you can force turnovers?
I mean, definitely pressing, 2-2-1, 1-2-2, half court traps, 1-3-1s. I've seen some really good 1-3-1s. I've seen more recently since I've moved to the girls' side, 1-2-2. I've seen that become kind of popular in the half court. And let's see, what are some other ones? Like sometimes doubling the post. It's a good way to get turnovers if you're good
Yeah.
at doubling the post, especially if you're coming from the baseline and your players are in sync on that. Um, yeah, any type of trapping defense. Really, teams that pressure a lot, teams that are really good at pressuring, obviously going to force some turnovers as well. But that again, that's you got to be really good about teaching that and how to rotate and cover the backside, because anytime you're putting a ton of pressure, probably going to get beat sometimes, and so you got to be able to rotate.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was last episode or when, but we talked about, the high risk of trapping and double teaming. We were talking about double teaming. So like, to me, it's like if you play against a team that you can kind of smell blood and like maybe they don't have good ball handlers, then you can go and extend and force turnovers. But if you do it against a good team, then, that's going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Another idea that came to my mind was like just putting in like different systems that most teams have, as far as if someone picks up their dribble, everyone's in deny, right? You can force a turnover there. I remember I think you were at our St. Joe game. I don't know if it was last year or the year before.
Mm-hmm.
They would play man defense and trap the first pass like almost every time. And it was kind of one of those things where they smelled blood. I mean, we weren't ready for it. They were very athletic and quick, and so they were able to force turnovers off that in the first quarter. So stuff like that, I like stuff like that. I like, having certain calls where on the first pass we just trap it all of a sudden, stuff like that. My favorite way to force turnovers is with the trail trap, meaning if you're like in a man press, someone's bringing it up, that you force them up the sideline, they dribble up the sideline, then you sprint to cut them off, and then someone traps from behind. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really tricky one, because I know as a player that I've gotten caught in that a few times, where you're like, okay, I got to beat this guy one-on-one. Okay, or I'm going to go this way, and then all of a sudden you're cut off, so you pick it up and you're like, I'm just going to turn, I'm going to pivot right now and pass, and then it's like, oh, you're trapped. So that's a good
Mm-hmm.
way, I think. But yeah, any other ideas on that?
No, I think those are most of them. I don't know. They're probably something we're not thinking off the top of our head, but that's the main ones. There is just trapping, especially full court, but half court as well. And then just a lot of pressure, I think are probably the best ways to manufacture turnovers.
Yeah, and also forcing baseline is part of it too. Not only to help, but I think you can rotate well out of if you rotate well out of that. It's almost like it's a system, right? Like, oh,
Hmm.
I know that guy's going baseline. I know that guy's going to help. I know I'm going to rotate on the corner guy or whatever, and like you can manufacture steals there.
Hmm.
Trying to think if there's really anything. I guess one other idea could be like to pick up full court. You'll probably force more turnovers if you have a really good defender picking up full court. Throughout the course of a game, you might get one off that. So that's the
Hmm.
last thought.
Like your point guard just turning them as they come up.
Yeah, you could probably get it. If you do that well, you'll get at least one turnover per game off that. In,
Yeah,
in high
probably
school,
true.
in college,
Yeah.
you're not going to turn that guy over for that. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is an interesting question. Are some positions allowed to have more turnovers than others?
So short answer, yes, but it's a little more complex than that. And it's kind of weird because in some ways it's counterintuitive. I feel like my starting point guard that's handling the ball like 35 minutes a game is allowed to have more turnovers than, someone else who maybe, even if they're playing equal, but doesn't handle the ball much, or it definitely if they're playing less minutes, point guard's allowed to have more turnovers. The thing that's counterintuitive about that is your point guard's supposed to be the best ball handler and the person that never turns the ball over.
Mm.
But like I said, that's just not, if I got the ball in my hands 35 minutes a game and you've got it for 5 minutes, like I'm going to expect you to really never turn it over. And I'm going to expect that point guard to maybe turn it over, like you said, maybe 2-3 times. So yes, there definitely is a difference there. Just in general, I think generally speaking, players that keep the ball in their hands a lot more, they get a little more leeway. With that being said, you got to be careful because I've definitely had games where I've seen my players all of a sudden that 3 goes to like 6, or a 7. And you're like, okay, now we're getting a little out of hand here. We need someone else to start handling the ball. And sometimes you don't have the luxury to have a great secondary ball handler. So yes, you do get a little more leeway at those positions, but you got to be careful and not get out of hand.
Yeah, I agree. Your point guard's always going to normally have more turnovers. I think for the point guard, it's all about the assist to turnover ratio, right? If they have a good assist to
Mm-hmm.
turnover ratio, then you're like, okay, they're okay. Because I mean, you probably can relate to this as a point guard who probably watched your turnovers a lot. Like sometimes you get a turnover, but it's not your fault, right? It's the other guy's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, the rule is anytime you're denied, you should back cut. And so you throw that back cut, right? Because that's the rule but for some
Mm-hmm.
reason that player didn't, they're out there dancing and
Mm-hmm.
throw that turnover. That's on you, as far as the stats go.
Right. Yeah, no, for sure. Or you throw a pass and they're not ready for it and it kind of goes off their hands. And, the stat book can kind of decide who they give it to and they give it to you. And it's like, but, that's just part of the job, I think.
Or you just get a catch and like a player throws it to you, right? Like in the coffin corner and you just get trapped, and you're just like,
Yeah. You're like, thanks, man.
yeah. That scenario kind of reminds me of like when the shot clock's running down, like,
Yeah.
5, 4, 3. Oh, here you go. You pass it.
Yeah.
Else. They're like, all right. Now I used to hate that. You're like killing
Yeah.
the shooting percentage on there.
Right. Like, what am I supposed to do with this now?
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk. We'll close this out in a minute, but let's talk about maybe one of the most important concepts of the conversation, and that's how to help your team minimize turnovers.
So I think that it's a multifaceted answer to this. One thing is you cannot solely drill it. Okay. Like what I mean by that is you can't just do drills and be like, oh great, now our turnovers are going to go down. Like that's just not how it works. It's a combination of playing games, of them getting used to playing games against opponents that have it, or even in a practice playing against each other live. But I would say obviously better is playing against someone else, because when you play against your own team you get to learn those tendencies. So that's where, like, to me, summer ball comes really into play, or if you have a fall ball season, stuff like that is really good. But I do think you can also use drills to help minimize it. So first, just teaching concepts of like, okay, here's a scenario we're in. Where should we look to pass the ball? And, trying to get players to understand where to look. And then 2, working on those skills. So just your basic passing skills. I mean, it never ceases to amaze me how poor most players are at passing the ball. I would say the majority of players cannot really successfully, at least, high school. I'm sure as you get to college that increases, but high school, which is really the foundation for college players, So many players just cannot pass with their left and right hand consistently. They can pass with one, but if they pass to the left, they do that kind of cross body, like 2-hand pass. They can't throw an outside hand push pass, or if they have to throw it, they can't throw very strong or very accurately. Or just in general, even with their strong hand, they're throwing the ball over people's heads or throwing at people's ankles. All those little skills of just being able to really control the ball are ways to minimize turnovers. So I think you can drill it by working on those skills, but you also have to get live playing going. Otherwise, it's not gonna really have a cohesive agreement between both sides and really work in a game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the thing that I agree with the most that you said is the concepts, like, if you are drilling and making a huge emphasis on jump stopping, that's going to help your turnovers. Teams that do a good job jump stopping in the lane, that helps. If you make rules like don't jump to make passes, I think that'll help you lower turnovers. And then also, I think, not just knowing your press break, but knowing, where to look in your press break, where to look when you're being trapped, and then also trapping drills, right? How to, fake a pass, make a pass, those kind of things, I think will help. Anything that's going to help minimize traveling. And that's one thing that I need to get better as a coach is it's hard, it's hard in practice to literally call every travel. Like, kids travel a lot more in practice than they do in the games. But then in the games, all of a sudden they travel and you're just like, what, how, but it's like, well, for me, like, I need to do a better job of every single time someone travels in practice, just like blow my whistle, like, that's travel, because I don't know. Can you relate to that? Can you, like, in practice, I feel like people travel a ton.
I do think they probably get away with it more. I don't know. I feel like I try and call it when I see it so that they know. But you're probably right. I didn't have a major issue with traveling a ton. Not like where it kept happening over and over again. At least with my girls last year. So I can't speak too much on that. But at the same time, I think maybe sometimes with the boys, they're going so fast that they just get it and go, and that's where you start seeing some travels. So I do think that one of the hardest parts of practice is you get your 2 hours or, whatever, sometimes 2.5 if you're lucky, and you want to teach team concepts. And I think the hardest part is getting in skill work, and then not only getting in skill work, but getting in the right skill work, because it's one thing just to be like, all right, get your shots up, or, hey, we're going to do some attack moves and score layups and all that. But then I feel like a lot of times things like passing or taking care of the ball or little techniques like that, we forget about those things, and we think it's just like, okay, go your skill work, your basics, fundamentals, dribble, pass, shoot, score, and then run our offenses and then play, and obviously I'm simplifying it quite a bit, but it's sometimes hard because you don't feel like you have the time to really be like, all right, here's how we're going to work on just this. We're just going to focus on this one thing today. You only have so much time with them every day.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I have to admit, last year we didn't do a single charge drill. We talked about it in a few shell drills and stuff, but like, that's one thing that I want to dedicate, every other practice, just 5 minutes. Here's how you help baseline and take the charge, in a 2-on-1, here's how you take a charge, stuff like that. And I think, yeah, like you said, you only got so much time. So it's just like, how do you fit everything in? It's hard.
Yeah. That's why I think obviously practice planning and scheduling helps you out a little bit, but even there, you just sometimes you forget about stuff.
Yeah. And the coaches that have been coaching for years and years, like, they have the advantage, right? Because they have their system in place. They don't have to even teach their kids, the plays, their offense, because they've been running it since they were in 9th grade. And, we're getting closer to that point, but in year 3, but at the same time, still a lot to cover every practice. So.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you guys liked today's episode. Turnovers, the ultimate sin in basketball. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like today's episode and you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, you can follow us there as well. We release a new video once a week, and thanks again for watching. We hope to see you guys in the next video.
Peace.